Hey guys, tonight we're pulling back the silk curtains on one of the most indulgent, regulated, and honestly bizarre aspects of world history, the bedroom politics of Imperial China. And you're not just stopping by, you're stepping into the role of the emperor. Yeah, you right there in your sweatpants. But before you settle too easily onto that jade throne, let's be upfront. You might not make it through this. Not only due to the plotting concubines, overly eager eunuchs, and endless ceremonies, but because juggling a harem of thousands while navigating political authority and ancient ideas about intimacy could prove deadlier than any fight. So, before you relax, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly like what I create here. Oh, and share your city and the current time where you are. I'm interested in where all my time-traveling emperors are watching from. Now lower the lights, perhaps switch on a fan for that gentle ambient noise, and let's gently step into this evening's exploration together. You're lounging in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, the emperor's personal space tucked deep inside the Forbidden City. The atmosphere carries a subtle hint of sandalwood and lamp oil. Beyond the walls, court officials still hustle like ants under the deep orange twilight. But inside, time eases up. Your evening isn't focused on updates or uprisings. It's centered on the schedule. And yes, there's an actual bedroom schedule. Your concubines, reaching thousands in the height of dynasties like the Tang and Qing, are organized, graded, and cycled with administrative accuracy. A chosen group is called each night. The choice isn't haphazard. Absolutely not. It's a procedure using wooden nameplates kept in a container known as the Upupi, each one etched with a lady's name and stored cool in silver bowls. Eunuchs lift them, declare your selection, and then get ready. They transport the picked concubine wrapped in a silk blanket to your sleeping quarters. That's right. Carried like a cozy burrito to prevent her from slipping in poison, weapons, or charms to boost fertility. And she had better be in good health. Before she reaches you, she's been checked, washed, scented, and frequently evaluated by a doctor to confirm she's not quietly menstruating. In traditional Chinese medicine, that was seen as a major cosmic taboo. Every element of imperial intimacy is steeped in tradition. From the timing, always set for auspicious hours, to the orientation of the bed. You, as the Son of Heaven, must direct harmony through your vital force. This isn't merely enjoyment. It's governance, philosophy, and a constant responsibility. It's tough to picture today, but for numerous emperors, the experience of sex wasn't primarily for individual satisfaction. It was an obligation, a holy duty to align the universe via union. You're not simply enjoying yourself. You're upholding universal balance. And that burden, sure, it builds up. You could have preferred concubines, perhaps the gentle-voiced Lady Jiao or the spirited Lady Li. But you can't always select them. You need to distribute your yang energy thoughtfully across the harem, pairing yin and yang based on Taoist diagrams. Too much time with one lady, and your vitality could diminish. Too little, and the empire's rice crops might suffer. You believe I'm overstating? Taoist intimacy guides, some dating to the Han Dynasty, cautioned against careless excess. Too many climaxes, they warned, depleted your jing, your essential life force, and might cause an untimely end. Engage moderately or risk a glamorous demise. Naturally, not all emperors followed this. Some essentially hosted epic intimacy sessions like Emperor Wu of Jin, who reportedly passed away during the act. A fact, perhaps, or a cautionary story handed down by critical Confucian chroniclers. Also, probable academics continue to discuss if these tales of death by desire were accurate or merely alerts about the perils of luxury and neglect of proper rule. It's the old-time equivalent of a sensational headline. Emperor discovered lifeless with beloved concubine, but inscribed in elegant script on bamboo strips. So, there you are, reclining on brocade cushions as a concubine kneels before you, gaze averted, hands slightly quivering, not always from fright, but from strategy. For her, this isn't merely a moment of closeness. It's a chance for advancement. One pregnancy could lift her from a minor servant to a respected mother of a potential heir. But don't relax too much. That very pregnancy might turn her into a mark. Poisoned bruise, mysterious losses, vanishing attendants, it's all routine in the harem. And it's your role to oversee it all, or assign it to a sharp eunuch who likely knows more about your private life than you. The harem isn't a wild free-for-all either. It has a rigid structure. The Empress holds the pinnacle, trailed by imperial consorts, noble concubines, and then the extensive roster of seldom-seen ladies whose existence centers on the dream of one evening with you. Some will enter and exit the palace without ever being called. Others will ascend dramatically, like consort Yang, whose allure was claimed to make flowers shy, and whose closeness with Emperor Xuanzong ignited envy, conflict, and ultimately revolt. That's the level of personal risk involved. Craving a fun detail? The emperor couldn't even start things on impulse. He couldn't simply declare, "Hey, I'm feeling it." Intimacy was documented in formal court logs. Yes, bureaucrats maintained a thorough record of whom you shared the bed with and when. Like a heavenly HR team, these entries were crucial for lineage, inheritance, and even taxation. Producing a valid heir wasn't merely preference, it was state business. And naturally, enveloping all this was the dense atmosphere of ceremony. The imperial sleeping area was hushed, save for the whisper of garments, the far-off toll of bronze bells signaling the hour, and the subtle chant of invocations to the forebears. You'd assume with all the stress, the encounter itself would be strained, perhaps even uncomfortable, and it frequently was. For the concubine, a single error could lead to exile. For you, a controversy. Yet somehow, within these narrow boundaries, affection sometimes emerged, though it usually carried complications. So as you recline there, gazing up at a sculpted dragon suspended above your canopy bed, ponder this. Absolute authority might allow you to call for beauty whenever, but enjoyment here isn't straightforward. It's political drama. It's philosophical right. It's individual peril. You have 3,000 women competing for your notice, but not a single soul you can fully rely on. Except perhaps that one elderly eunuch who's been by your side since you were 10. And even he's been known to chat. And this is merely your initial evening. You awaken to the fragrance of lotus flowers hanging in the air and the soft ringing of bronze bells beyond the window lattices. Morning glow seeps through the silk drapes, warm and scattered. The concubine has already departed, removed by eunuchs before sunrise to avoid any unsanctioned lingering or the risk of interfering with imperial lineage. She'll be assessed, questioned, and returned to her assigned rooms. You, on the other hand, extend across the vast bed, sensing both divine and strangely vacant. It's another day as the emperor, and you're already off pace. Today's matters aren't with advisors or frontier disputes, but with something much older and tougher to manage. Your own finite life. You've caught the whispers emperors don't merely succumb to sickness or killers. They wither, sapped by longing, eroded by generations of tradition. You don't wish to be recalled as yet another depleted sovereign discovered sprawled on silk linens, lips pale, with a roll of Taoist intimacy lessons clutched in your grasp. So you follow what countless before you have. You seek advice from the alchemists. They appear in flowing garments, carrying scents of embers and preserved plants, bearing vessels of shimmering dusts and parchments marked with curving emblems. Their message is consistent. Eternal life doesn't reside in rock or blade, but within your own form. Harness your jing, they advise. Purify your essence, restrain your impulses, and crucially, don't release your seed excessively. That's the source of your might. You're doubtful, but not rejecting. After all, you've studied about Qin Shi Huang, the initial emperor, unifier of China, a titan of suspicion and drive. He was fixated on immortality. The man commanded the building of a huge burial site protected by 8,000 life-size terracotta warriors, just in case the beyond needed reinforcements. He also apparently died after consuming mercury pills. A bitter irony, since mercury was meant to grant him everlasting life. And yet, you understand it. The notion of mortality claiming someone with sacred blood feels absurd. You're the link between heaven and earth, the actual son of heaven. How could the natural realm affect you? Unless, naturally, you're squandering your life force each night into ornate cushions and exhausted concubines. So, you learn. The Taoist writings from the Han and Tang dynasties are particularly enlightening, if also puzzling. They portray immortality as a sort of inner conflict, clashes between yin and yang, semen and respiration, craving and self-control. You discover the technique of Fang Zhong Shu, the arts of the bedroom, where intimacy is handled not as delight, but as remedy and right. Per these manuals, ejaculation is a deficit, but union without release, that's expertise. You're intended to extract the yin energy from the woman, incorporate it, cycle it through your system, and come out more potent than prior. Essentially, tantric-style intimacy, but with extra paperwork. The demand to achieve this equilibrium is immense. The court doctors monitor your energy, and your nearest eunuchs, who have their own secret access to hidden texts, remind you not to squander the dragon's essence. In an odd manner, even your longing has been claimed by the state. You start to question if delight is merely another guise for labor. One outlier idea you come across proposes that sexual power can be redirected to enhance mystical skills, clairvoyance, visionary dreams, even levitation. You don't truly accept it, but a portion of you desires to, particularly when you learn that some emperors sought to extend their lives by being with virgins, especially young ones, believing it would refresh their yang. That tale circulates strongly around Emperor Wu of Han, who allegedly encircled himself with teenage girls and avoided climax completely. Did it succeed? Well, he reached his 70s, which in ancient China was practically immortality. But not all pursuits of immortality are so methodical. Some are odd. One late Ming emperor supposedly hired a group of astrologers to map the ideal moment for intimacy to maximize spiritual benefits. That involved being with concubines at 3:17 a.m. while oriented east on the second Tuesday of a lunar month. If that doesn't ruin the atmosphere, nothing will. Still, mortality hovers. You've learned of leaders who attempted to evade it only to hasten their own fall. Mercury toxicity, depression from abstinence, ceremonial fatigue. Some experts contend that the fixation on immortality in fact made emperors more susceptible to control. If the appropriate alchemist vowed eternal life, he could essentially turn into the emperor's phantom. And in the recesses of your thoughts, you keep returning to Qin Shi Huang. He didn't merely construct walls and forces. He pursued everlasting life throughout the whole realm. He dispatched fleets eastward to locate the mythical Isles of the Immortals, where sages allegedly sustained on dew and moonlight. None of the ventures came back. Some claim they escaped to evade penalty. Others say they discovered utopia and simply didn't want to reveal it. Scholars today still discuss if these journeys were genuine, symbolic, or a sophisticated publicity effort to conceal that the emperor was terrified of perishing solitary. As you drink a tart elixir composed of ground pearls and deer antler, you begin to perceive a reality no one voices. Sex and mortality are connected for emperors in a manner that's nearly lyrical. You engage with hundreds of women, not to honor life, but to combat death. Every tradition, every protected evening, every breathless meeting, it's all a sort of wager. If you triumph, you prolong your existence. If you fail, you become another warning story like Emperor Ai, who was said to be so enchanted with his male companion that he disregarded state matters and was eventually deposed. Of course, no one will venture to express any of this directly to you. Your court will persist in providing you potions, youthful maidens, and heavenly maps. Your eunuchs will continue to organize late-night meetings like strategists plotting a battle, and your alchemists will guarantee that your essence is radiant, but you're beginning to suspect the reality. The chase for immortality might be ending you quicker than time itself. You're wide awake once more, not from anxiety, though there's ample of that, but because your thoughts are racing with sketches of respiration, paths of energy, and whirling eddies of yin and yang. You've been poring over the Taoist intimacy manuals again. The truly ancient ones that the eunuchs only produce under firm directives. These aren't some musty parchments packed with lovely verse. They're detailed, mysterious, and profoundly peculiar. One opens with a phrase that makes you pause. When the jade stalk enters the golden gate, the celestial dragon stirs. Right. So, this evening you're going to rouse a dragon with your form. You chuckle quietly, then halt because even amusement seems like it could sap your power. That's the essence of Taoist bedroom methods. They render everything holy and mildly hazardous. According to these doctrines, intimacy isn't merely a delight or a means to produce heirs. It's a metaphysical workout, an opportunity to sync yourself with the cosmos to fortify your spirit and, ideally, to endure forever. You've already consulted with your Taoist instructor, an elderly man with eyebrows so extended they twist like calligraphy marks. He's demonstrated where to apply pressure, when to inhale, and most vitally, when not to conclude. Ejaculation is demise, he cautions in a hoarse murmur. Retention is eternity. So now you're engaging in the ancient craft of jewel cultivation. It's less of a frolic and more of a measured waltz, like tantric yoga conducted in quiet with the weight of cosmic equilibrium hanging over your bed. The aim is to engage in intimacy without climax, to channel the heightened energy through your meridians like water via canals. You're meant to draw in deeply at the peak of sensation. Tighten your muscles, direct your eyes upward, and draw the seed back into the spine. Sounds intimate, doesn't it? Your concubine this evening is seasoned. She's been instructed in this. In truth, some women were deliberately nurtured from youth in Taoist groups, solely to serve as companions in this method. They aren't merely partners. They're energy sources, meticulously chosen for their yin purity, their age, and occasionally even their zodiac. Tonight's companion, Lady Ju, has skin like new porcelain and a manner of motion that's more like a ceremonial step than a lure. She kneels, murmurs a chant you scarcely grasp, and assists you into the correct stance. This is less prelude and more celestial navigation. The pair of you proceed together gradually, purposefully, each movement matched with an inhalation, each exhalation intended to anchor your essence. It's not solely about restraint. It's about converting the impulse into strength. Allegedly, if executed flawlessly, you can experience visions, soaring dreams, or at least stave off gout for a few additional years. And Lady Zhu, she's concentrated. Her eyes are half closed in meditation, and she's whispering things about jade halls and dew on lotuses. It's lovely in a way, but it's also tiring. A part of you begins to ponder, is this intimacy or a highly intricate high-stakes slumber? There are even cautions in the text that overdoing this, yes, even sacred intimacy can result in soul loss, sudden nosebleeds, and apparitions. One tale asserts that Emperor Liang of the Western Han attempted to compel a girl to engage in ritual intimacy every night for a month, and she began floating and shedding blood. Perhaps legendary. Perhaps a phantom tale recounted by court doctors to encourage you to take an evening off. Naturally, you're not the only one who ever found these rituals daunting. There's a story about Emperor Zhang of the Han Dynasty, who was so dedicated to adhering to Taoist bedroom approaches that he reportedly died attempting to withhold climax with his preferred consort. Her attractiveness was mythic. Poets composed that she danced on the palms of men and left no impressions. And he, unfortunate soul, tried to navigate that cosmic surge until his essence shattered like a fragile vessel. The irony: no heir, no immortality, just an awkward entry in the historical annals. But not all experts accept these accounts. Some argue the notion that emperors practiced intimacy as spiritual growth was more myth than reality, a method for subsequent dynasties to justify or idealize indulgent rulers. Others contend the reverse, that we've undervalued how profoundly Taoist metaphysics influenced imperial strategy, particularly during the Tang and Song eras when the fusion of spirituality, medicine, and intimacy was particularly intense. The truth probably rests somewhere amid, part authentic method, part political spectacle. You're starting to sense that spectacle now. There's a eunuch positioned outside the drape, attuned to the pattern of your breathing. He'll document the meeting, assess your pulse afterward, and even note how many movements took place. That's correct. Imperial intimacy includes performance indicators. And if that seems intrusive, wait until you learn about the essence summaries that go straight to court healers. Too lethargic, and you might be recommended rhinoceros horn powder or tiger bone wine. Too energetic, and you might be prohibited from sexual activity for a week to conserve your qi. So, as you recline here, Lady Zhu resting next to you like a breathing sculpture, your limbs buzzing with what could be energy or perhaps just weariness, you start to comprehend the gravity of it all. This isn't passion, it's demand. It's a scripted ritual etched in muscle strain and respiration. And yes, it's somewhat alluring in a mystical art performance sort of way. But it's also draining. There's no embracing after, no murmured quips, just quiet. And the awareness that you've either contributed one more drop of strength to your reservoir or unintentionally spilled the entire contents. As your Taoist instructor would phrase it, each drop preserved is a day prolonged. You're not completely persuaded, but in the serene hours before dawn, you prefer to think it could be accurate. You're seated in the hall of supreme harmony, feigning attention as your ministers ramble about crop allocations and regional conflicts. But your thoughts keep wandering back to last night's silent, breath-coordinated intimacy. Or was it breath warfare? Hard to determine. Either way, it left you with aching legs and a vague feeling that your spleen might have shifted. But before you can linger too much on your inner alchemy advancement, There's a light tap at your side and a subtle whisper. The eunuchs seek your focus. You nod and stand with rehearsed dignity. Another gathering, another issue. But this one is occurring behind partitions. You know what that signifies. It's bedroom affairs. In the realm of Chinese emperors, there's no genuine divide between the court and the bed. Politics doesn't halt when the silk robes slip off. And right now, your gatekeepers to that private realm, the eunuchs, have something pressing to relay. Now let's discuss eunuchs. These men are your most dependable counselors, aides, and sometimes arrangers of allure. Their duties aren't limited to handling documents and igniting incense. They are the adhesive that binds your harem. They've been surgically modified. Yes, that sort of modification to guarantee total allegiance and, of course, to remove any possibility that the imperial bloodline gets contaminated. Their absence of equipment makes them reliable in principle, though in reality, they've still risen to vast influence through pure cleverness. Inside your private hall, the chief eunuch bows deeply, his voice resembling dry paper fluttering. Your Majesty, there was a disruption last night in the southern pavilion. You lift an eyebrow. Disruption is never a positive term. It turns out two lower-ranked concubines got into a heated argument over whose Upupi was more likely to be selected this week. The dispute escalated to shattered porcelain, bruised faces, and one toppled incense burner. These are the sorts of hidden skirmishes that define life in the harem. Brewing competitions, envy over timetables, and planned efforts to draw nearer to you, the living symbol of divine authority. And it's all overseen by eunuchs. These men deliver your commands, maintain order among the concubines, and serve as silent observers to your most intimate instants. They even participate in examination rituals. Yes, they inspect the concubines before and after a nightly visit, verifying cleanliness, confirming no incantations or toxins are concealed in clothing, and noting any wounds or oddities. It's all very meticulous and, depending on your disposition, either profoundly reassuring or utterly unsettling. Eunuchs aren't merely elevated servants, though some become influential figures. During the Tang Dynasty, one eunuch named Shi was so dominant that he essentially managed the court from the sidelines. Another during the Ming-led troops. Eunuchs regulated information streams, access to your presence, and sometimes even fabricated reports to shield their preferred ones or remove competitors. You think the ministers are intimidating? Try opposing a eunuch who knows every detail of your timetable, tastes, and vulnerabilities. Let's not overlook the obvious, or rather the blade in the room. Becoming a eunuch wasn't simply about securing a position at the palace. It entailed a painful, often rough procedure performed in unclean settings with no assurance of survival. Some were castrated as kids by needy families aiming to gain court goodwill. Others chose it willingly, pursuing status, closeness to authority, and riches. Because yes, a triumphant eunuch could accumulate vast wealth. He couldn't transmit a name or offspring, but he could possess property, effect assignments, and even aid in installing an emperor on the throne. In a peculiar, distorted sense, eunuchs existed both above and below society. They were ridiculed by intellectuals, dreaded by commanders, and essential to all. And you interact with them daily, entrusting them with the protection of your body, your descent, and your seat of power. It sort of makes you question who's truly in command, doesn't it? One especially quirky custom you've grown to accept is the ritual of the bedtime accompaniment. Each evening, a eunuch oversees your chosen concubine's trip to your rooms. She's bathed, dusted, and enveloped in ceremonial silk. Then, here's the strange bit. She's raised and carried by two eunuchs like a holy tribute. Her feet must never contact the ground during the journey. This apparently stops her from being altered or introducing negative energy. Also, it ensures no lady sneaks into your space unbidden, which has indeed occurred before. Legend tells that during the Song Dynasty, a concubine forged her name tag and bribed a minor eunuch to enter. She was uncovered later, but not before conceiving. That incident concluded with multiple banishments, and the eunuch involved vanished. Naturally, all this makes the eunuch's role more than organizational. It's spiritual as well. They are viewed as threshold beings, not fully male, not fully female, inhabiting a third enigmatic realm that renders them ideal mediators. Some even gain respect as shamans or interpreters of signs. If a eunuch dreams of blood, it might indicate war. If he dreams of peaches, it could signify a birth. Dreams are noted, examined, reviewed in morning sessions. You grin, recalling the occasion one aged eunuch maintained that a dream about frogs meant you should skip fish for a month. You indulged him. Then a competing noble choked fatally on a carp bone. Coincidence? Perhaps, perhaps not. There's still discussion among contemporary historians about exactly how much authority eunuchs held. Some contend they were scapegoats for larger institutional shortcomings, faulted when dynasties fell or emperors grew lavish. Others cite solid proof. Decrees authorized, wars initiated, and empresses selected under eunuch direction. Either way, their existence was unavoidable, and you, like every emperor prior, rely on them. Back in the moment, the lead eunuch wraps up his account and bows. You express gratitude, request the two quarreling concubines be given meditation tasks, and then you hesitate. "Bring me Lady May tonight," you say gently. The eunuch nods, jots a subtle note, and retreats into the dimness. Another name entered on the parchment, another evening coordinated, another confidence maintained. And as you resume court duties, approving a plan for canal fixes, you can't help but marvel at the oddity of your existence. You are the most influential man on earth, and your evenings, your most personal instants are planned, monitored, and documented by a crew of surgically changed officials with sharper recall than any of your commanders. Somewhere outside, a bell tolls 3 times. A concubine's bath commences, and you ponder, just for an instant, what it would be like to be ordinary. It's late afternoon, and the light is starting to mellow into that warm glow that makes even the stone lions in the courtyard appear sleepy. You wrapped up court early, one of the uncommon advantages of being emperor when you decide to bypass the specifics of local grain squabbles. Instead, you're heading to the western section of the palace where someone has been anticipating all day. Her name isn't listed in public records, though everyone recognizes who she is. She is the most dominant woman in the palace, second only to you and in certain ways far more threatening. She is the Empress Dowager. She doesn't stand when you arrive. She stays on her carved rosewood seat, her face inscrutable behind layers of powder, gems, and flawlessly composed indifference. It's a skill to seem both unimpressed and unassailable. Her fingers rest gently on a small carved phoenix, and her lips curve upward just a bit. She's glad to see you, or entertained. With her, it's often difficult to distinguish. Tonight, you're not here as her son, stepson, or remote kin, depending on how the dynasty connections were set. You're here as emperor, confronting the matriarch who once wielded and may still wield the actual reins of control. And she, as ever, is evaluating you. The Empress Dowager knows every regulation of the palace. She helped establish some. She's maneuvered through years of schemes, repelled assassins, quieted opponents, and tactically positioned her allies in the harem to sway your father or your brother or you. In her company, even the most daring generals hold their tongues. And yes, long ago she was also merely a concubine. Intelligent, youthful, driven, and very, very fortunate. You're considering all that as you sip the tea she provides. Osmanthus light and sweet, but possibly meaningful. Everything with her is meaningful. You recall the accounts about Empress Dowager Cixi, who basically governed China from behind a curtain for almost half a century. She began as a low-ranked concubine, bore a son, and schemed her way into regency with unparalleled political accuracy. When male ministers opposed her participation, she literally sat behind a silk screen during court gatherings and conveyed her decisions through go-betweens. Power without ever needing to be visible. Cixi also exercised influence in the bedroom, or rather via it. She determined who met the emperor and when, especially if the emperor was too young or too unwell to decide himself. There are murmurs that she occasionally arranged encounters with particular concubines, not for their attractiveness, but for their lineages. Noble families that could be kept near or suppressed according to her desires. Rumor suggests she even selected bed warmers, women who would heat the emperor's bed before the real concubine arrived, under the guise of verifying the warmth. Imagine that position. Scholars discuss whether Cixi was a villain or a misjudged genius. Some labeled her a despot who redirected funds to rebuild palaces while external forces threatened the borders. Others say she was a shrewd manager, the only one keeping the fragile Qing court intact while the outside world advanced at alarming speed. The truth, like everything in the palace, probably hides somewhere in the folds of her embroidered sleeves. You're not Cixi's son, but the Empress Dowager facing you has the same vibe. She can ruin a man with a sigh, and when she leans forward to talk, it's not idle chat. It's tactics. "You've been preferring Lady May lately," she says softly, gaze fixed on your teacup. You pause. There it is. The actual motive she called you. She's been observing, computing, perhaps even questioning the eunuchs you trust. Nothing escapes notice in her section of the palace. She has a mild temperament, you say cautiously. She has a risky uncle, she responds just as cautiously. And just like that, the whole space changes. You're no longer discussing choice or romance. You're discussing court politics, group alliances, and the frighteningly genuine chance that too much time with the wrong lady could upset the power equilibrium. In the imperial court, desire is perilous, not because of what it fulfills, but because of what it pledges. An emperor's fondness is a form of money. Every time you favor someone, you're investing in a family, a group, perhaps even a future uprising. It's no surprise that the Empress Dowager, once a concubine herself, grasps this better than anyone. She is the living proof of what a smart woman can accomplish with limited access to power and a brilliant sense of timing. And she knows, probably better than you, how the harem operates behind the barriers. She's likely stationed her own favorites among the concubines. Women who report to her, who observe what you consume, who grin and murmur things designed to guide you subtly in her favored path. You think you're in charge of your evenings, but more than once you've awakened feeling like the piece in someone else's match. Still, you're emperor, at least formally, and you remind her of that with a small, intentional grin. "I'll keep your worries in mind," you say, standing, "but I trust my judgment." She doesn't reply immediately. Then, very gradually, she lowers her head, less a gesture of yielding than recognition. The discussion is finished, but the struggle persists. As you stroll back to your quarters, past marble yards and twinkling lanterns, You realize just how much of your intimate life is not about passion, but control. It's not just about who shares your bed. It's about who arranged for them to be there and what wave that decision will send through the palace. In this world, the Empress Dowager is the grand director of desire, not by temptation, but by oversight. Later that night, Lady May joins you as requested. She's lovely, kind, and just reserved enough to be charming, but you can't shake the resonance of your earlier talk. As she pours your wine and smiles at you under long lashes, you wonder, is she fond of you, or just enacting the role assigned to her? Does she know what her uncle is scheming? Does she mind? You reach for her hand regardless, because even emperors feel isolated. Even deities on thrones need someone to regard them as a person, not a rank. But when she leans closer, her scent suddenly reminds you of Osmanthus, and you wonder if that too is a signal. The next morning, you wake with a persistent ache in your chest. Not from ailment, not from effort, but from something you can't quite identify. Maybe it's the perfume again. Osmanthus. It clung to Lady May's robe, her skin, even the sheets. Or maybe it's the aftertaste of doubt twisting in your stomach like bad wine. You've spent your entire life encircled by women trained to satisfy you, assist you, and observe you. And while last night was tender, almost pleasant, it was also a reminder that in your world, closeness is a show, and trust is as scarce as a snowflake in midsummer Beijing. Still, the day presses on. You handle a few routine scrolls, meet briefly with the Minister of Rites, and endorse 3 garden redesigns that honestly all appear identical. But by early afternoon, something unusual draws your attention. A gift arrives, a small silk-wrapped package from the northern provinces, accompanied by a note from one of your more showy nobles. The package holds a shoe, or rather a slipper. And not just any slipper, a lotus shoe. It's almost unbelievably tiny, no larger than your palm. Adorned with fine embroidery of butterflies and peach blossoms, the slipper is dainty, soft, and oddly unsettling. You hold it in your hand and think, someone's whole foot used to fit in this. And not just fit was shaped, bound, reformed to fit, all for elegance, all for appeal. Footbinding. The word alone makes your toes curl. It started centuries ago, a distorted display of refinement that became a cultural norm, especially among the upper class. The procedure began when a girl was as young as 5. Her feet were soaked in warm herbs, her toes bent under, and the whole foot tightly wrapped to fracture the arch and reshape it into a lotus. A perfect foot was ideally 3 inches long. They called them golden lotuses. You call them horrifying. Still, for emperors and aristocrats, lotus feet were considered the height of eroticism. The smaller the foot, the more elegant the woman. The more she limped, the more she swayed. The more effort it took for her to move, the more desirable she became. It was beauty through pain, fragility as fascination. And make no mistake, it was a fetish. You've heard the stories. Emperors who asked their concubines to walk barefoot on silk just to observe the marks their bound feet left. Some required their concubines to wear nothing but their embroidered lotus shoes during private meetings. There are even legends, some whispered, some written, of rulers who preferred to never see the foot unwrapped, keeping the mystery like some holy scroll. One particularly odd anecdote involves an emperor from the late Ming who collected the unwashed bindings of his favorite concubines and stored them in lacquered boxes, perfumed and catalogued like poetry scrolls. Whether it was the aroma, the notion of loyalty, or just the sheer strangeness of the practice is unclear. But it reveals something about how fixation was fostered, even celebrated behind palace doors. But you, seated on your throne, holding this soft, silent shoe, you're uncomfortable. Because while part of you grasps the attraction, who doesn't want something unattainable? Another part sees the insanity in it. These women, born into a world where the form of their feet decided their destiny, had no option. Bound feet meant they couldn't run, couldn't dance freely, couldn't stand long. It made them reliant, graceful, and most importantly to those in power, confined. The practice was never required for palace women, yet many chose it or were chosen by their families to undergo the binding ritual. To be considered for concubinage, girls had to match the emperor's preferences. And if small feet were the fashion, then broken bones were just part of the tryout. You've seen the files, the detailed lists of potential concubines, including not just their height, family status, and skin shade, but their foot size, arch firmness, and walking elegance. This wasn't choice. It was curation. Of course, not every emperor indulged in the foot fascination. Some resisted it subtly, preferring women who could ride horses, dance without stumbling, or stroll beside them in the garden without relying on a staff. During the Yuan dynasty, when Mongol rulers held power, footbinding was frowned upon. They favored sturdy women with strong bodies, warrior heritage over fading flowers. But by the Ming and Qing, it had surged back into popularity. Some scholars argue this was about cultural unease, a way to reaffirm control and tradition in times of social turmoil. Others say it was simply the natural endpoint of aesthetic fixation. Even today, debates continue. Was footbinding about beauty, control, class, or all of it? Some historians highlight the agency of the women involved, suggesting that some selected it voluntarily for the prestige it offered. Others argue that labeling it a choice is absurd when the alternative was poverty, disgrace, or exclusion. In your palace, it's just another indication that even beauty has a cost, and women have always paid more. You set the lotus shoe aside and dismiss the eunuch who brought it. Later that evening, as you stroll through the jasmine garden, you spot one of your concubines approaching. She's young, probably just past her 15th year, and her gait is delicate. Too delicate. You observe her move with that careful, slow swaying motion, as if every step is both labor and display. When she bows, you catch the gleam of tiny silk shoes beneath her robe. Peach blossoms, just like the ones on the gift. You ask her name. She says it softly. Laner. And then you do something unexpected. You ask her to sit beside you. Not walk, not bow, not perform, just sit. She's puzzled, perhaps anxious, but she obeys. And together you watch the koi swim in slow circles through the moonlit pond. Her hand trembles slightly in her lap. Your shoes, you say gently. Do they hurt? She pauses, looks at you, and then with a voice no louder than a breath says, yes. It's the first honest answer you've heard all day. You don't sleep much that night. Not because of discomfort or nightmares or state affairs, though those would be good excuses, but because you're thinking about shoes. Not your own, of course. You haven't tied your own laces or fastened your embroidered slippers in years. No, you're thinking about Laner and the thousands like her. Women trained from childhood to move like swans and break like porcelain. Your bed is large, warm, and guarded on all sides. But tonight, it feels like a quiet stage. A little too quiet. You roll onto your side and eye the wooden box on your nightstand. It contains the Upupi, the name tags of concubines waiting for selection. There are hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each lacquered and labeled, stored in silver trays, rotated, cooled, and cleaned daily by your eunuchs. Most of the names you recognize only vaguely. They arrive like wind chimes in a storm delicate, interchangeable, and temporary. But each of them, in theory, gets a chance. Here's how it works. Each night, the Court of Internal Affairs, yes, that's a real department, delivers the name trays to your sleeping quarters. The tags are sorted by rank, the Empress at the top, then imperial consorts, noble ladies, talented women, and so on, all the way down to the lowly attendants. Even the titles feel like a game or a marketing campaign. Talented woman sounds more like a stage name than a government rank. But here, it determines who gets a seat, who gets a servant, and who gets a shot at immortality through motherhood. You're expected to pick one, or sometimes two, name tags each evening. The eunuchs note your choices, deliver the fortunate women to your chamber always wrapped like dumplings in ceremonial blankets, and record the encounter in the imperial log. Yes, there's an actual logga little red book where your intimate history is written down, complete with dates, names, and in some eras, even details of the interaction. Don't worry, no steamy confessions. Mostly just who arrived, how long they stayed, and whether there were any auspicious signs. Because the goal isn't just pleasure, it's reproduction. Your virility is the empire's safeguard. The more sons you have, the better your dynasty's odds. And yet, it's not that simple. The timing of each visit is calculated around astrology, your health, and the woman's fertility cycle, sometimes tracked through pulse readings and occasionally wild guesses. You might be in the mood on a Tuesday, but if the court astrologer says your yang is clashing with the moon's water spirit, you're waiting until Thursday or next month. It's not just the scheduling that gets ridiculous, it's the bureaucracy. In some dynasties, concubines had to register their menstrual cycles with eunuchs. Yes, you read that right, a ledger of periods tracked and updated like a weather chart. This was supposedly to avoid impure nights, but everyone knew it was also about paternity control. You didn't want a concubine showing up pregnant after 3 months without having been summoned. That raised questions, dangerous questions. Of course, the Empress had her own scheduling privileges. In theory, she could assign nights to favored concubines or veto others she didn't trust. She also had the privilege of visiting you, a rare reversal of roles. But even that was ritualized. She had to send word in advance, dress in specific ceremonial robes, and be escorted by eunuchs. Nothing in your life, not even love, happens without a form. The system, while absurdly complicated, was meant to be fair, at least on paper. Every woman got a rotation. Every title had its moment. But you know the truth. Fairness is for tails. In reality, favorites get more knights, more gifts, more sons. A clever concubine might bribe eunuchs to accidentally shuffle her tag closer to the top. Others flatter the Empress or spy on rival girls to gain a precious edge. And then there's the real nightmare, not being chosen at all. Some concubines spend their entire lives in the palace without ever seeing the emperor's bed. They arrive at 15, full of hope and carefully rehearsed etiquette. By 30, they're still waiting in silk robes they've outgrown, waiting through endless lantern festivals and birthday rituals and spring banquets where you don't even recall their names. Eventually, they're reassigned to lower duties: music, embroidery, or temple service. It's like early retirement, but with far more incense. You once heard of a woman who wrote a secret diary in the margins of prayer scrolls, documenting every night she was overlooked. She eventually became a Buddhist nun within the palace walls, shaving her head and renouncing desire, but still sleeping with the candle lit by your name. One quirky twist to all this: some emperors took it very seriously. The Yongle emperor of the Ming Dynasty reportedly had every concubine cycle and last encounter recorded in tiny calligraphy on scrolls the length of a dining hall. His obsession with precision was so intense that court officials began calling him the great scheduler behind closed doors. He believed divine order required exact timing, and that included sex. But the real surprise? There were nights when you didn't get to choose at all. Sometimes the Empress Dowager made the decision, or the astrologers, or the Bureau of Ceremonial Affairs. Imagine being told, as the most powerful man in the realm, that you are scheduled for intercourse with someone you barely know because Jupiter and the rice harvest have agreed it's optimal. That's not love. That's logistics. Tonight, though, the tray is in front of you, a quiet moment of imperial choice. You run your fingers over the name tags. Each one is smooth, cool, anonymous, except one. Lady Laners. Her name sits heavy in your palm. You hesitate. Choosing her again so soon will send a message to the Empress Dowager, to the other concubines, and especially to the eunuchs who log everything. It will spark whispers, rivalry, maybe even resentment. But not choosing her, that's political too. In the end, you don't choose. You set the tray aside and lie back in bed, staring at the ceiling carved with dragons and clouds. Let them gossip. Let the record show a blank night. Even emperors need a break. Dawn arrives softly, sliding across the stone floor in hazy gold, catching on the trailing hem of a curtain and the lacquered legs of the dressing table. You're already awake when it comes, staring blankly at the carved canopy above your bed, where clouds and cranes swirl forever in wood. A rare empty night, and still you didn't sleep well. There's something disorienting about deviating from the script. The eunuchs don't quite know how to respond when you interrupt the rotation. You can sense it in their polite bewilderment, in the way they ask, "Does your majesty require the tray returned?" As if afraid you might reconsider. You didn't. But the silence was loud. So today, you distract yourself the traditional way with books. Not state documents, not court reports, though you'll get to those. No, today you reach for the novels and scrolls stowed in the Imperial Library. Secret delights bound in faded silk. Stories inked by candlelight long before you were born. Tales of love, intrigue, and indulgence that have somehow endured wars, reforms, and dynastic changes. Your favorite? Dream of the Red Chamber. Now, you've probably heard of it, one of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature, an epic maze of aristocratic romance, poetry, and deep psychological ache. But if you've never read it sprawled out on an imperial chaise with your outer robe half undone and a bowl of lychees at your elbow, you haven't really experienced it. And tonight, we're doing just that. Set in the decaying splendor of a noble family. Dream of the Red Chamber is basically a high-drama, slow-burn glimpse into the lives of women confined in luxury. You recognize the world right away. The palatial garden strolls, the layered etiquette, the underlying tension behind smiles. But what makes it compelling isn't the setting. It's the feeling. These aren't flat characters sighing in moonlight. These are fierce, layered, jealous, grieving, compassionate heroines who wage emotional battles with a fan flick or a perfectly selected verse of poetry. It's like palace reality TV penned by a philosopher with a shattered heart. The story focuses on Jia Baoyu, a young nobleman born with a piece of enchanted jade in his mouth. Because why not? And his complicated relationships with 2 very different women. The dreamy, melancholic Lin Daiyu and the steady, graceful Zhui Baochai. On the surface, it's about courtship, inheritance, and the gradual decay of a wealthy household. But underneath, it's all about desire subtle, aching, unspoken desire. Reading it feels almost risky. Not because it's shocking, though parts definitely are, but because it's familiar too familiar. The emotional maneuvers, the nuanced conversations, the strategic illnesses and weaponized poetry. Your concubines could have authored this book themselves. Sometimes you wonder if they've committed it to memory as a survival guide, and honestly, you wouldn't fault them. You recall one scene vividly. Bao Yu slips into the women's quarters, a forbidden area even for a noble son, and lies beside Dai Yu under the shade of wisteria. They discuss dreams, death, how love might not endure beyond the garden wall. There's no kiss, no scandal, just vulnerability so sharp it pierces. And you think, when was the last time someone looked at me that way? Not with fear, not with scheming, just truth. You shift in your seat. The story weighs heavier than anticipated. It's odd, isn't it, that a novella work of fiction can capture something you've never fully possessed. Not with Lady May, not with Laner, not with your Empress. Not really. You've had nights of laughter, sure bodies beneath silk, whispered promises, but something raw, something equal. That's harder to find. And you're not the first emperor to be haunted by this book. It was banned in parts of the Qing Dynasty, viewed as subversive, too emotionally honest for a world built on stoicism and ritual. But that didn't stop palace women from sneaking pages under their pillows. Some eunuchs were known to recite passages aloud during bath time, their voices echoing off marble as concubines pretended not to weep. Even some emperors secretly admired Bao Yu's defiance, the way he prioritized affection over duty, poetry over power. There's scholarly debate, of course. Was Dream of the Red Chamber a thinly veiled critique of Qing society? A subtle protest against arranged marriages and stifling gender roles? Or was it just one man's epic diary of heartbreak dressed in metaphor? The author, Cao Shueqin, never completed the final chapters, and scholars have been arguing about their meaning for centuries. Some believe the unfinished ending is deliberate, a literary reflection of how desire often concludes, unresolved, aching, unfinished. And that ache, you feel it now. You close the book and gaze across the room. The palace is quiet at this hour, too late for court and too early for supper. Just you, the drifting incense, and the endless murmur of lives unfolding around you. Hundreds of concubines, each in her own room, waiting. Some composing poetry, some weaving, some perhaps rereading the same lines you just did and wondering if you'll visit them tonight. Sometimes, when you walk past their quarters, you catch a verse floating from behind a screen, a soft voice reciting, "In dream, I return to that fragrant land where falling petals cover the ground." You don't interrupt. You just listen. Because in a place like this, where every touch is logged, every glance measured, poetry is the closest thing to freedom. And stories, they're the only safe way to tell the truth. You wonder how your story will be remembered. Will you be another name on a scroll, a footnote in someone else's memoir? Or will a concubine, years from now, whisper your name in a poem about a night that never quite ended? You set the scroll back on its lacquered stand. The light is fading now, deepening into amber. Somewhere outside, the peacocks are calling. The garden waits, and you, strangely enough, feel a little more human than usual, not because of power, but because of a story. The rustle of silk is as familiar as the clink of jade hairpins by now. You hear it everywhere in the gardens, in the corridors, echoing from behind carved wooden screens. But it takes on a different tone tonight. Sharper, more intentional. You can sense it even before your eunuch whispers. There's unrest among the concubines, Your Majesty. Of course there is. You've disrupted the schedule, strayed from the sacred rotation, skipped names that were supposed to be picked, and now the palace harem is shifting, not with open rebellion, but with whispers, glances, and quiet conflict. To the outside world, the imperial harem is a fantasy, a lavish array of beauty, grace, and feminine influence orbiting the emperor like stars around the moon. But you know better. The harem is a realm within a realm, a place of changing alliances, hidden sabotage, and ambitions as keen as hairpins. And when you favor one woman more than others, or worse, ignore too many consecutively, the balance tips. You step into the inner garden where the higher-ranked concubines take their evening strolls, and you can feel the tension in the air like a storm about to break. The women move in carefully spaced groups, each surrounded by their maids and eunuch chaperones. Every gesture is orchestrated. The flick of a fan, the turn of a head, the arch of an eyebrow. But behind the poise, there's scheming. Near the pavilion, Lady Jia One of your imperial consorts, known for her cool charm, gives you a lingering bow. Not deep enough to show respect, but not shallow enough to warrant punishment. A challenge, then. You know her kind. She's seen her sway slip a bit lately. She's noticed Lady Laner getting 2 summons in the same week. She's noticed you skipping nights, and now she's reminding you in that subtle, courtly manner that attention comes at a cost. Your Majesty seems thoughtful this evening, she says with that voice of glass and honey. I've had much on my mind, you reply. She smiles. Perhaps some company would ease the load. There it is, the smile a dagger wrapped in courtesy. You nod politely and continue. But she'll recall this exchange. Tonight, her maids will relay your every word, and Lady Laner, if she's wise, and she is, she'll be keeping low. Behind every painted face in this garden is a silent battlefield. These women live together, sleep in adjacent rooms, dine side by side at banquets, but they're rivals, not for love, for survival. Because in this palace, being unseen is worse than being hated. The lowest-ranked girls, the ones whose names barely get noted, start to fade from discussion altogether. Their titles diminish. Their rooms grow chilly. Eventually, they're reassigned to religious duties or ceremonial roles, their hair pinned into quiet obedience, forgotten. You remember one such girl, Lady Yin. She came from a noble family, bright-eyed, full of wit. You spoke to her twice, then never again. You didn't even know she'd been reassigned until you saw her lighting incense in the palace temple head shaved, eyes downcast. When she looked up just for a second, her gaze was unreadable. Not grief, not anger, just distance. You looked away first. That's the danger of the harem. It's not passion that ties these women to you. It's ambition. Each one arrived here with hopes pinned to their sleeves. A family hoping for favor. A child with imperial blood isn't just a baby. It's a ticket to legacy. For the concubine, it's elevation. For her clan, it's power. And for the others, it's a threat. Which is why jealousy in the harem can be deadly. There are stories. Some buried, some whispered of poison teas, tampered incense, accidental shoves on slippery stairs. 1 year, 4 concubines miscarried in a single season. The official records blamed stress, climate, bad luck, but no one believed it. The eunuchs heard the rumors. The Empress never commented. One particularly notorious case occurred during the Tang Dynasty when consort Wu Yes, that Wu, who would later become the only woman to rule China in her own name, was accused of murdering a rival's infant child and blaming it on the Empress. True? Maybe, maybe not. But the accusation worked. The Empress was deposed. Wu rose. And history made space for her. It's no different now. Every smile you receive is half performance, half negotiation. Every compliment hides a calculation. And still, you're expected to walk this tightrope every night, choosing which concubine to favor without tipping the balance too far. You're supposed to inspire loyalty while nurturing a system built on quiet betrayal. Sometimes you find yourself staring at the name tray as if it's a deck of fate cards. Who to please? Who to punish? Who to keep waiting just a little longer to stir desire? And above all, who can you trust? Tonight, the answer seems to come with the rustle of robes. Lady Laner enters the hall where your calligraphy scrolls are kept, unannounced but not unwelcome. She kneels silently beside the brush table, pouring you tea without being asked. Her movements are careful, measured. She doesn't ask questions. She just watches. You're quiet tonight, you say. She nods. There's nothing to say that wouldn't cause trouble. Smart girl. You hand her the brush and gesture to the parchment. Write something. She hesitates only a moment, then dips the brush in ink and begins. The strokes are steady, graceful. A poem one you recognize. To compete for favor is to burn incense in the wind. Even the brightest flame can vanish in a breath. You say nothing. Neither does she. For all the silk and scent and smiles, this is the only real honesty you'll get, a single shared moment of understanding, not just between emperor and concubine, but between two people trapped in the same gilded cage. When she finishes, you roll the scroll up carefully and tuck it away. Tonight you won't summon anyone. But tomorrow, the name tray will be heavier than ever. There's something about a secret that charges the air, makes it buzz at a different pitch. You can feel it tonight, thick as incense smoke lingering in the corridors as you head toward the plum blossom courtyard. You don't usually venture this deep into the concubines' quarters without notice, and certainly not without your usual entourage of eunuchs. But tonight's different. Tonight, you're pursuing a ghost story, or maybe trying to capture one. The rumors started softly, as they always do. A low-ranking attendant spotted something, someone gliding through the halls past curfew, someone not in the official records. No name tag, no planned visit, just silk in motion. A figure moving like a concubine, but not any recognized concubine. By morning, 2 maids had been reassigned. A eunuch disciplined, and still no explanation offered. But you heard, and you asked nothing aloud. That was 3 nights ago. Now, as you move through the lantern-lit walkway, you wonder, what if it's true? What if someone is slipping through the gaps of your meticulously managed pleasure system? In a palace where everything is documented, scheduled, and double-checked, could there still be space for a forbidden romance? You reflect on earlier dynasties when emperors sometimes broke their own rules and surrendered to the excitement of genuine yearning. One tale always whispered, never officially recognized, involves Emperor Xuanzong of the Song Dynasty. The story claims he fell for a palace musician, a woman not of noble blood, not ranked, not approved for imperial touch, But he loved her anyway, in secret. They met at night in the scented shadows of the southern gardens. When the affair was uncovered, he exiled the eunuchs who guarded his secret and sent the girl to a convent. But legend says she left him a poem stitched inside a sleeve. Only the moon knows what the court forgets. Tonight, you feel the tug of that same forbidden thread. You reach the courtyard and find it silent, empty, but not lifeless. A few lamps still flicker by the paths. The night wind stirs the willows gently, their slender branches tracing secret patterns against the flagstones. And then, just as you're about to turn back, you hear it. Soft laughter, not too distant, definitely female, and not the practiced, delicate kind reserved for court. You move toward the sound like it's bait on a hook, heart doing something it hasn't in a while, beating for curiosity instead of duty. You reach the edge of a shaded alcove and pause. Inside are two concubines low-ranking by their robes. Simple, no embroidery, hairpins modest. One is seated with a book in her lap, the other kneeling beside her, adjusting a ribbon on the first's waist. The moment is close, but not sensual. It's friendship, maybe more. You can't tell. They don't see you, which is rare. No one ever fails to notice you. But here, in this quiet, forbidden corner of the palace, you're just a man in robes standing where he shouldn't. You back away without a sound. As you walk back toward your quarters, you can't help but think, what else happens here that you don't see? What other secrets bloom like night jasmine in the corners of your empire? It's not just the concubines with concealed feelings. The court has known its share of scandal affairs that could have toppled dynasties or did. Take Emperor Xuanzong of Tang and his beloved consort Yang Guifei. Their passion was so notorious it found its way into poems, paintings, and at least 3 political disasters. She was blamed fairly or not for, diverting the emperor's attention while rebellion brewed. The Lushan Rebellion, to be exact, a catastrophic uprising that nearly shattered the Tang dynasty. In the end, under pressure from his own soldiers, Emperor Xuanzong was forced to have her strangled. Her death became legend, immortalized as a symbol of love too powerful, too indulgent, too dangerous, a reminder that even emperors are not immune to heartbreak or consequences. And then there was Emperor Ai of Han, who famously shared his bed with Dongxian, a male companion he cherished so deeply that he once cut off his own sleeve rather than disturb Dong's sleep. That moment became so iconic that the cut sleeve still endures as a euphemism for male-male romance in China. Their bond was whispered about, romanticized, and condemned, depending on who held the pen. But what's undeniable is the emperor's vulnerability. Love in any form made him less predictable, and predictability is what the court relies on. As you slip back into your chambers, the eunuchs rise to greet you, puzzled by your absence, but too well trained to ask questions. They begin the night's routine, offering the tray of name tags, lighting the lavender oil, unrolling the bedding. You wave them off. Not tonight. They leave silently, the door closing behind them like the end of a song. You lie back and stare up at the ceiling again. There are so many stories buried in these walls, so many touches that history doesn't record. Your own, perhaps among them. Desire here isn't about lust. It's about defiance. Every forbidden touch, every unapproved whisper, every secret smile is an act of rebellion against the rigid ritual of your life. And maybe that's why you find yourself smiling just slightly as the candle flickers out. Because somewhere in your palace, Someone is in love, and for once, it has nothing to do with you. Morning sunlight slants across your calligraphy desk, catching the edge of a jade brush rest shaped like a curled dragon. You should be signing tax reform documents right now. Instead, you're thumbing through a scroll wrapped in silk the color of old bruises. It's a copy of the secret instructions of the Yellow Emperor, a Taoist text so dense and esoteric that you once joked it would take a decade to comprehend and another to forget. It's filled with metaphors, rivers of breath, gates of jade, pearls of dew. But behind the poetry lies a singular obsession: dual cultivation. You've heard the phrase before. In the context of imperial duty, it gets tossed around like tea leaves in a pot. Advisors love to say it in that wise, vaguely conspiratorial tone, as though repeating it enough times will unlock immortality itself. But what is dual cultivation really? It's sex, yes, but it's not just sex. It's ritual, alchemy, spiritual discipline, the merging of male and female energies to create harmony not just in your body, but in the cosmos. It's also, if we're being honest, one of the most overcomplicated ways to avoid climax ever invented. Taoist masters insist that if practiced correctly, dual cultivation can replenish your life force, clear your meridians, and heighten your divine link to the universe. But if done wrong at best, it's a wasted evening. At worst, you age too soon, lose your teeth, and start forgetting the names of your sons. No pressure. Tonight, you're set to practice with Lady Xia, a woman trained in the inner arts of energy circulation since the age of 8. She's graceful, calm, and disturbingly well-versed in phrases like breath drawing and essence containment. When she arrives, she's dressed not in sheer silks or perfumed robes, but in pale linen that looks more fitting for a monastery than a bedchamber. Her hair is pinned simply, no jewelry, no cosmetics. This isn't seduction, it's sacred geometry. The eunuchs bow and depart, and the chamber door closes with a soft finality. You sit opposite her on a cushion, knees aligned, palms facing upward. She closes her eyes. You follow suit. And together you start the first phase, synchronized breathing. Inhale to the count of 7. Hold for 5. Exhale like you're releasing 1,000 years of ancestral trauma. After several rounds of this, your lungs ache and your mind is a little hazy. She hasn't even touched you, and already you feel like you've aged and been reborn 3 times. Finally, she moves, not toward you, but around you, tracing the air with her fingertips. She murmurs words in a dialect you don't understand. The scroll said this chanting invokes the celestial guardians of your vital organs. The lungs get a white tiger. The liver gets a blue dragon. Your reproductive system that gets a laughing toad. Apparently, you're trying not to picture it. At last, she sits close beside you. Her hand brushes your forearm, the touch feather light but electric. This is phase 2, energy exchange. The idea is to let your yang, your active, assertive force, meet her yin, soft, passive, receptive. But if you do it too quickly, the balance breaks. You have to build the charge gradually, like coaxing a reluctant phoenix from its nest. The scroll is clear. The man must not release his essence. The woman may release hers repeatedly, as this draws forth the hidden spirit of the dragon without draining the immortal spring. In other words, she can climax. You cannot. Welcome to Performance Anxiety Taoist Edition. You shift uncomfortably. Lady Xia senses it. She smiles faintly. "You're thinking too hard," she whispers. "Easier said than done when half your training involves muscle clenching, breath control, and imagining your spinal column as a ladder to the heavens. Still, you try." Her movements are slow, meditative. The act itself, if it can still be called that, is less like lovemaking and more like a deeply collaborative musical performance. There are rhythms, pauses, flourishes moments where nothing happens, but the silence itself is charged. You're supposed to draw her energy into yourself through breath, through proximity, through some imagined channel that no physician has ever located, but which the Taoists insist is more real than your spleen. You visualize it like the scrolls instruct. A golden spiral traveling from your lower abdomen up your spine, over the crown of your head, and back down again. No spillage, no heat loss, just an eternal recycling of arousal into vitality. It's beautiful in theory. In practice, it's hard not to think about the fact that you are still technically naked and sweaty and lying very close to someone who seems way more spiritually advanced than you. There's a moment brief but real, when you feel something shift. It's not dramatic. No celestial music, no floating, but your heart feels lighter. Your breath deepens. And for a moment, you stop wanting anything. You just are, fully present, fully still. Then the moment passes. Afterward, she dresses in silence. You offer her tea. She accepts. Neither of you speaks about what happened or didn't happen. That's part of the agreement. Dual cultivation isn't about confession or praise. It's about refining yourself, removing desire by swimming through it, then letting it go. There are scholars today who argue this entire practice was mostly metaphor-coded way to describe self-discipline and mental focus, rather than a literal sexual technique. Others insist it was real, with entire manuals dedicated to postures, timings, and breathwork. Some researchers even believe it functioned as a form of birth control, a state-sanctioned method to regulate heirs while pretending it was about spiritual harmony. You're not sure where you fall in that debate. All you know is that you feel different, not drained, not elated, just a little more grounded in your body, less like a figurehead, more like a person. Outside, the wind rustles the garden trees. The stars are sharp and cold above the palace roofs. You think of all the other emperors who tried to extend their lives through ritual to cheat time by mastering their urges. Did it work? Not for most. But maybe the point isn't to live forever. Maybe the point is to live even briefly with awareness. You blow out the candle. The last thing you see is the silk-wrapped scroll on your desk, still slightly unfurled. A phrase dances in the shadows before the flame dies. To master the self is to master heaven. Maybe so. You're standing on the moon-viewing terrace, gazing out over the imperial gardens bathed in silver. The air tonight is brisk, almost sharp-cutting through the layers of silk draping your shoulders. Behind you, the red lacquer walls of the palace rise like a fortress of memory. But for once, the silence isn't stifling. It's calming, peaceful. You've had no visitors tonight. No Lady May, no Lady Laner, no sage-like jewel cultivation with Lady Xia. Just you, the moon, and your own overworked heartbeat. It feels good to be alone, except you're not. You hear the footsteps long before you turn, light, deliberate, measured, but not timid. And when you finally glance over your shoulder, you see a man approaching, young, elegant, and striding with a confidence you rarely see from anyone who isn't a general or a prince. He bows deeply but without groveling. He's dressed in scholar's robes, Plum-colored and understated, his hair tied with a single silver thread. He waits for your acknowledgement. You nod. This is Sima Jun, your newest poetry tutor. Officially, he's here to refine the lyrical balance of your seasonal proclamations. Unofficially, he's one of the sharpest minds in the court, keen as a blade, and prettier than half the concubines. You've heard the whispers already. Eunuchs passing messages, courtiers raising eyebrows, palace artists sketching him from memory. He's the kind of man who lights up a room without uttering a word, and he knows it. He steps beside you and looks up at the moon. Tonight is the 15th day, he says softly. The full moon, perfect for a poem or a quiet betrayal. You arch an eyebrow. Is there a difference? He smiles only with the corner of his mouth. Not always. You're not sure when it begins. The shift, the tension, the way he speaks to you not just as emperor, but as equal. He quotes obscure Tang poems with ease, comparing palace duty to plum blossoms withering on a scroll. He says, "Your writing is heavy-handed, strong brush, but lacking wind." No one speaks to you like that, and somehow you don't mind. Over the next few days, he visits more often, always under official pretense. Readings, calligraphy, seasonal verse. But there's something behind his glances, something in the pauses between lines of poetry that feels like more than literary critique. You catch yourself watching the way he holds a brush, the way his sleeves slide when he leans over your desk. One evening, your hands brush accidentally, and neither of you pulls away. It's subtle, nothing explicit, but in the palace, subtlety is scandal. And it's not without precedent. You've read the histories. You know about Emperor Ai of the Han Dynasty and his favorite Dongxian. The story everyone remembers is simple but powerful. One morning, Dongxian fell asleep on the emperor's sleeve. Rather than wake him, Emperor Ai cut the sleeve off and rose silently. That gesture, gentle, wordless, absurdly romantic, echoed through centuries. The cut sleeve became a phrase to describe male love in the imperial court, a whispered metaphor that blooms in poetry, in song, and behind fans at midnight. Dongxian was promoted, rapidly made commander of the imperial guards by the time he was 20. His rise was suspiciously fast, and many in court protested, some out of concern, others out of jealousy. But Emperor Ai stood by him. Publicly, privately, without shame. Records say their bond was unbreakable until the emperor died. And then Dongxian, alone and unprotected, was forced to take his own life. Another reminder that in the palace, love is dangerous when it doesn't follow the rules. You've also heard rumors about other emperors less well documented, more buried in euphemism. The emperor favored his steward for evening conversation. He often requested the company of his cousin's son during moonlit banquets. These lines are scattered through official records like hidden ink, visible only if you know what to look for. Desire, when inconvenient, is edited into suggestion. Even now, scholars argue over these histories. Was Dongxian a true lover or just a tool of favor? Was the relationship political, emotional, or both? Were these men rebels against social convention, or simply victims of a system that allowed anything behind closed doors but demanded denial in public? No one knows for sure. But you know one thing. No one cuts off their own sleeve for a pawn. Back in the present, Sima Jun is sitting across from you, reading aloud from a poem he's just composed. His voice is low, clear, intimate. If I were the ink, would you let me spill across your skin? Would you press me into permanence or blot me dry with silence? You don't respond, not out loud. The air between you is charged. It's not lust. It's not even simple comfort. It's something far rarer in your world: recognition. That night, you don't summon a concubine. Instead, you have wine sent to your study. Sima Jun joins you. You read old poems, laugh quietly, and when the moon is at its highest, you lay your head down on your sleeve beside his and pretend, for just one moment, that this is all there is. No empire, no lineage, no scrolls, just two people breathing in rhythm. No words are spoken, no sleeve is cut. But you understand why Emperor I did it, and you know if it came to it, you might do the same. Tonight, the palace is quiet in that strange, expectant way, like it's holding its breath. Outside, the cicadas hum, steady and ancient, as though nothing in the world has changed. But within the walls of your chambers, the air is different, thicker, richer. It smells of amber oil and plum blossom, with a trace of something else. An edge of anticipation, or perhaps tension. You're sitting at your dressing table, half-dressed, robe loosened, staring at the silk garments laid out for you by the eunuchs. Not for ceremony, not for court for bed. Not to sleep, of course. No one expects an emperor to simply sleep in his bed. Tonight, the ritual is layered in silk and suggestion. This is one of the few evenings when protocol bends slightly in favor of performance, not just the act, but everything around it. The clothing, the preparation, the pacing. Because in the Imperial Palace, even seduction is a procedure. You slip into a robe the color of ink at dusk, its fabric soft as breath and lined in gold thread. It isn't meant to be removed hastily. It's meant to glide off section by section, like the slow peeling of an orange. Each layer a promise. Your hair is brushed back long and clean-tied loosely with a single thread of red silk. The look is casual but designed. Effortless elegance. When the concubine enters Lady Jiao tonight, you barely glance at her at first. That's part of the rhythm. Eye contact too early breaks the spell. She bows deeply, and her robe slides slightly off one shoulder as she does. Not an accident. The candlelight hits her just right, highlighting the sheen of her skin, her long neck, the embroidered plum branches climbing up her sleeve. Her face is carefully painted. Light rouge, lined eyes, lips stained like pomegranate seeds. It's not the face of a lover. It's the face of a ceremonial offering. And yet, there's a practiced humanity to her performance. She knows her timing, her angles. She's been trained in the art of anticipation. One moment too fast, and the illusion shatters. Too slow, and desire cools. There's choreography here, not unlike a dance, and both of you are performers. She begins with music. A servant enters briefly, sets down a guqin, and leaves. Lady Jiao plays just for a minute. A piece composed for the emperor of a long-gone dynasty, meant to evoke rivers in spring and the slow bloom of peach trees. It's quiet, restrained, perfectly elegant. When she finishes, she doesn't look at you. She simply sets the instrument aside and waits. Now it begins. She steps forward slowly, removing her outer robe as she walks. Underneath is a gauze layer, barely there embroidered with silver cranes. Her movements are deliberate, sensual without being overt. This isn't about carnality. It's about suggestion, letting the eye imagine what the mind isn't yet allowed to touch. The bedchamber is lit with only 2 lanterns tonight. One near the dressing screen, the other beside the bed. Shadows dance across the walls, soft and fluid. Lady Jiao kneels before you and unties the red silk from your hair. She doesn't speak. Speech is not encouraged during this ritual. The act itself, this entire process, is designed to feel sacred, less human, more celestial. For the Emperor, sex is not casual, never has been. It's legacy, it's symbolism, it's fuel for the empire. And in some dynasties, it's theatrical. You think of Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty, who once commissioned a series of bedchamber scrolls, not for instruction, but for ambiance. Painted scenes of legendary lovers, mythical animals, clouds twining with dragons, all displayed on the walls like silent witnesses to the imperial act. Some emperors went further. Emperor Xuanzong allegedly held full moon pleasure ceremonies where music, poetry, and carefully staged erotic tableau unfolded like a shadow play before the main event, a fusion of art and arousal. But tonight is quieter. Lady Jiao rises. She touches your shoulder, her fingers cool, deliberate. Every move is calculated to echo something. A season, a poem, a memory. The silk of her sleeve brushes your skin. The robe slips from your shoulder. Her lips do not seek yours immediately. Instead, she traces the outline of your mouth with a fingertip as if reminding herself that you're real. You are, but you're also something else. In this chamber, in this moment, you are the dragon. The axis of heaven and earth, the body through which the empire breathes, and she is the mirror, reflecting, softening, shaping that fire into something human. The act itself unfolds slowly, not like it does with Lady May, whose touch feels like affection, or with Laner, who trembles when you so much as exhale. Lady Jiao moves like someone born of incense smoke. Fluid, ephemeral, always just out of reach. You wonder if she feels anything, if she ever has, or if she, like many concubines, was trained to become a mask rather than a person. Afterward, she rises without a sound, collecting her discarded robe and smoothing her hair. She bows again, even lower this time, and exits without looking back. The eunuchs will already be waiting outside to escort her. She'll be taken for inspection, for documentation, for bureaucratic archiving, everything recorded, everything filed. As you lie back, staring at the shifting lantern light on the ceiling, you realize something. You don't remember what her voice sounds like. You remember the notes of the guqin, the flicker of her sleeve, the way her gaze never quite met yours, but her voice? Nothing. In a palace filled with thousands of women, some of them will love you. Some will fear you. A few may even hate you. But many like Lady Jiao will simply perform. Not for you, but for the role you represent. The Emperor, the Son of Heaven, the man whose name they moan not for pleasure but for posterity. And you perform too. You sigh and reach for the scroll beside your bed. Not scripture, not edict, a poem. One line catches your eye. The silken robes may fall away, but still no name remains. You wonder if that's about her or about you. The next day begins with rain soft at first, a gentle tapping against the roof tiles, then heavier until the courtyards are glossed in puddles and the walkways shine like black ink. The palace slows when it rains. Servants whisper more quietly. The eunuchs walk with extra care. Concubines watch from lattice windows, their reflections mingling with the drops on the glass. Even you feel the change sitting in the study near a brazier, cloaked in a robe lined with fox fur, a cup of plum wine at your elbow, and an old scroll unrolled in front of you. Not just any scroll, it's from the Imperial Archive, unlocked only by your seal. One of the more risque classified collections the court pretends doesn't exist. But it does. And inside this lacquered box, you find what you've been seeking. A collection of erotic art once hidden away by an ancestor with good taste and a lack of shame. Paintings, calligraphy, and woodblock prints. Some delicate, some so explicit they make even you raise an eyebrow. This isn't court-sanctioned romance. This is lust captured in brushstroke. The first image is subtle. Two lovers under a silk canopy half hidden behind gauzy curtains. The woman's face flushed, the man's expression blurred. It's all implication. A foot peeking from under the blanket, hair disheveled just enough to suggest hours of pleasure. The lines are fluid, the style unmistakably late Ming. You know the artist, Chen Hongshou, who painted human intimacy with the same detail he gave to immortal sages. His lovers aren't idealized, they're real. And somehow, that's more provocative. The next scroll is less subtle. A woman on her knees, mouth open, hair undone, surrounded by jade ornaments that might be metaphors or just very ambitious accessories. The man is barely visible, more a suggestion of anatomy than a full figure. The painter cared more about the curve of the woman's back than the expression of her partner, which is telling. You roll through them slowly, one by one. Lovers tangled in impossible poses, their limbs like silk ropes, their faces painted with either serenity or madness, sometimes both. Some images include captions, short verses, most of them clever, many deeply crude. The dragon coils where the lotus blooms in silence. Thunder roars. You smirk. This art is not just decoration, it's confession. A secret window into what people wanted, feared, and dared to imagine. These scrolls were never meant for public display. They were kept in private cabinets, passed between trusted hands, studied by lonely scholars and mischievous courtiers. Some emperors collected them obsessively. Others banned them outright. Emperor Xuanzong of the Song Dynasty. An artist himself famously commissioned a set of erotic paintings said to be so detailed that they included facial expressions for every stage of climax. He called it the 12 Chambers of Spring. The scrolls vanished during the Jin conquest, but copies survived in secret. You've seen one. The faces are unnervingly tender. You remember wondering if anyone ever looked at you like that. Unguarded, not as emperor, not as destiny, but as a body. Of course, not everyone viewed this art as mere fantasy. Taoist practitioners believed erotic imagery could stimulate spiritual balance. Some claim that viewing these works before bed enhanced dream clarity or even strengthened the jing, the vital essence. There's a manual somewhere in the archive suggesting that placing a particular erotic scroll under one's pillow aligns the heart with the flow of heaven, as if heaven blushes at foreplay. And then there are the footnotes, literally. In the margins of one scroll, someone likely a bored scholar or an overzealous eunuch has written commentary. Not about the art itself, but about the implications. There's a note that reads, "The lady's expression indicates joy, but her eyes betray calculation. Is this not the true face of the harem?" You laugh aloud bitterly because it's true. You wonder what the women in these paintings felt, if anything. Were they painted from life, imagination, memory? Did the artist know their names or just their bodies? Were they courtesans, palace maids, wives? Some scrolls show women alone pleasure implied, without a partner. Others show group scenes elaborate, choreographed, bordering on absurd, and yet none of them feel fake. You think of Lady Jiao from the night before, how perfectly she moved, how little she spoke. You think of Laner's quiet pain, of Lady May's sweetness, of Lady Xia's breath control mantras, and suddenly these painted women feel very real. Not because of the sex, but because of the masks they wear, the same ones your concubines put on every day. You roll up the final scroll. It's different. No figures, just a robe crumpled on the floor and a poem written in tiny, precise characters. The robe remains, still warm from night. But where has the heart gone? No signature, no artist, just a question. No dynasty ever really answers. Even now, scholars argue over the place of erotic art in Chinese history. Was it a private indulgence or a reflection of courtly life? Was it suppressed by Confucian ideals or preserved quietly under the radar? Some insist that these images offer a rare look at personal expression in a society that otherwise prized restraint. Others claim they were nothing more than fantasy detached from the real experiences of concubines and lovers. But as you sit here, scrolls beside you, rain tapping at the windows, the line between fantasy and reality feels thinner than ever. You rise slowly, step to the window, watch the rain pool in the courtyard stones, filling the carved grooves like veins. Somewhere across the palace, a concubine is writing a poem. Another is staring at her reflection, wondering if tonight her name will be drawn. Somewhere a eunuch is sorting name tags, one hand trembling just slightly. And you're still thinking about that final scroll. The empty robe, the heat of the body, and the absence of the heart. This morning begins with an odd request delivered not through the usual chain of officials, but whispered into your ear by the chief eunuch as he adjusts your robe collar. Your Majesty, the testers await. You blink once, then again. Testers. It takes a moment to register, and then, like a wave of mortification rolled in silk, you remember. The virgin testers. A bizarre tradition, as ancient as it is, disturbing resurrected now by someone in the Bureau of Ceremonial Purity, who clearly has too much time and not enough shame. The eunuch bows unbothered as if he's just announced that tea is ready. You stare at him. Why? He bows lower. The Empress Dowager requested stricter protocols for confirming concubine suitability due to recent rumors. Ah, of course. The rumors that one of the lesser concubines may have lied about her status, that her maidenhood once assumed may have been a fiction. And since everything in this place from astrology to offspring hinges on bloodlines and appearances, now you get to participate in this ancient pageant of absurdity. It begins that afternoon in one of the side halls, quiet, curtained, and cold. You're not there for the actual inspections, thank all the ancestors. That duty falls on a specialized team of elderly female attendants known formally as genuine matrons, informally as the guardians of the Red Gate. Their task: to examine new concubines and confirm the presence of a certain anatomical sign believed to indicate virginity. It's awkward, it's invasive, it's wildly unscientific. But in the logic of the imperial court, it's sacred. You're led into a private chamber to review the reports. The documents arrive on thick, perfumed paper bound in red silk. Each contains a name, background, family credentials, and the matron's final verdict, often reduced to a single character, pure or unclear. It's clinical, it's cruel, and it feels utterly disconnected from anything resembling intimacy. You glance down the list. There's Lady Ren only 16, recently arrived from a noble family in the southern provinces. Her father sent 12 painted scrolls and a gold dragon hairpin with her. She's marked pure. Then there's Lady Ping 17, daughter of a merchant turned minister. Verdict: unclear. You can already guess what'll happen. She'll be quietly removed from the rotation, her family politely shunned. No scandal, just silence. And then there are the footnotes. Oh yes, the matrons love their notes. Exhibited nervousness, one reads. Too knowledgeable in court etiquette for her rank, says another. One bold matron simply writes, eyes too bold, not suitable for innocence. You wonder if that's a scientific observation or just personal judgment dressed in incense. You're reminded of a tale from the Tang Dynasty involving Emperor Taizong and a concubine accused of losing her virginity before entering the harem. She swore her innocence. A court astrologer was summoned to read her fate through the stars, while a matron rechecked the signs. After weeks of drama, she was declared falsely accused, but not before being confined to a meditation cell for 40 days. She bore the emperor a son years later, but her reputation never fully recovered. That son eventually became a general. History, it seems, enjoys irony. The whole thing is exhausting. You lean back in your chair, staring up at the ceiling, wondering who this benefits. Certainly not the women, not you. Maybe the matrons enjoy the illusion of control. Maybe the Empress Dowager enjoys the moral theater. But for everyone else, just another layer of performance. Purity as spectacle. There's a debate among modern scholars about this exact ritual. Some argue that the virgin testing tradition was never as widespread as the archives suggest, but many of these reports were fabricated or exaggerated to appease Confucian ideals. Others insist it was enforced ruthlessly, especially during the later Ming and Qing dynasties when ceremonial rigidity overtook almost every aspect of palace life. It's hard to say. Records were meticulously kept, yes, but you've seen what happens when records are inconvenient. One thing is certain. The obsession with purity had nothing to do with respect for women and everything to do with control. A virgin concubine was considered more malleable, more spiritually potent, less likely to bring disease or disorder. Some Taoist texts even claimed that the untouched womb channels the yin, most purely making her an ideal partner for energy exchange. Because, yeah, of course, even metaphysical nonsense needs a scapegoat. And there was always a darker undercurrent. Among your ancestors, there were emperors who took the purity ritual even further. Emperor Xuanzong of Ming, for instance, was known to interrogate concubines personally about their first dreams and earliest pulses euphemisms for menstrual and sexual awakenings. One concubine reportedly fainted during questioning. The next day, she was gone. Her family received a small box of silver and a polite dismissal letter. That was the end of her story. You flip through the remaining reports, face expressionless, but mind-racing. How many of these women are terrified right now, kneeling in examination chambers, stripped of dignity, trying to keep their breathing even while old hands prod? How many of them just want to survive? Later that night, you sit alone in your study, no company, no concubine. You pull out an older poem, one of your own, something you wrote years ago, back when the palace still seemed magical and mystery didn't yet mean danger. They enter like butterflies, wings folded in protocol. Not knowing the net is velvet, but a net all the same. You think of Lady Ping, of the way her name will vanish from the rotation, of the way her eyes, probably very bold, will flicker one last time before she disappears into the palace fog. And you wonder not for the first time, how many broken wings are fluttering in the corridors of your empire. Rain has given way to humid sunlight, and the palace walls seem to sweat with it. The courtyard steam as servants rush to mop puddles and sweep up the drowned petals of magnolia blossoms. Inside your halls, the air smells of fresh sandalwood and something fainter perfume, you think? Not from your usual circle, something richer, muskier, meant to cling to memory. You're not surprised when a eunuch leans in and murmurs, "Lady Jen requests an audience." Privately, you nod. Of course she does. Lady Jen is what court poets would call a woman of formidable bearing, not the youngest in the harem, nor the highest ranking. But she carries herself like someone who studied the map of this palace and memorized every trap. Her beauty isn't delicate. It's striking. Cheekbones carved like glass, eyes like polished obsidian, and she knows how to use them. She arrives dressed in red, not crimson, not the pale peony shade worn by hopeful concubines, but deep vermilion, the color of imperial sacrifice and power. She bows low, her back straight, neck exposed, every movement whispering intention. "Your Majesty," she says, voice smooth as lacquer. I've been reflecting. That's never a good sign. She sits only when you gesture, and when she speaks next, it's not flirtation, it's strategy. You've given much favor to Lady Laner. Some say she's even been seen consulting with the Empress Dowager. You blink once, a loaded sentence if ever there was one. You're not sure whether the second half is true or just bait. Do you say that? You ask, voice light. "I say what I see," she replies, hands folded neatly in her lap. "And what I see is that your Majesty may be too generous with women who lack foresight." There it is, the threat wrapped in silk. This is the other kind of seduction, punishment by pleasure, the quiet, calculated weaponization of intimacy. In the imperial harem, favor is more than affection. It's currency, shield, sword, and poison. To be chosen by the emperor is to rise above the wolves. To be ignored is to bleed slowly. So some concubines like Lady Jen learn to strike first, through gossip, manipulation, or something much more visceral. You remember the case of Consort Li from 3 reigns ago, who charmed her way to the emperor's side in under a month only, to be found later as the architect behind a string of sudden illnesses among her rivals. The poisons were subtle. A dose of powdered lead in face cream, a tincture slipped into herbal tonic, nothing that couldn't be explained by female fragility. She was caught only when her most loyal maid, in a fit of guilt or self-preservation, confessed everything to the palace guards. Consort Li was quietly removed. No records exist of her after that. Lady Jen is more careful. "I would never presume to interfere," she says now, though you both know she's already interfering. But there are other women in this palace who offer more than silk and moonlit poems. Her fingers trail along the edge of her sleeve. You follow the motion, realizing suddenly that she's wearing no jewelry, no bracelets, no hairpins, no distractions. Her only weapon is herself. And for a moment, you remember why you first summoned her months ago. It wasn't her looks, it was her laugh. Dry, intelligent, just this side of cruel. "You want to be seen," you say. She tilts her head, unbothered. "I want to be remembered." A strange kindness follows. Then slowly she rises and walks toward you, not with the coy grace of someone trying to seduce, but with the certainty of someone presenting a gift or a demand. She kneels not at your feet, but beside you, resting her chin on your armrest. "If your Majesty wishes," she says, "I can make you forget every name but mine." You believe her, which is the most dangerous part, because pleasure in this palace isn't soft. It isn't romantic. It can be used to reward, to distract, to punish, to dethrone. And sometimes it's handed out like poison disguised as wine. You think of Emperor Wu of Han again not for his military genius or immortality obsessions, but for his downfall. A favored concubine, Lady Ji, who gained such influence that ministers feared she might control the succession. Her sudden death was ruled a fever. Others claimed she was strangled in secret. One scribe brave or foolish dared to write in his diary, "She knew too much of the emperor's breath." That entry was erased, but you've read the fragments. Even now, modern scholars argue whether emperors like Wu were seduced or outmaneuvered, whether concubines like Lady Zhen were victims or tacticians. One historian calls the harem the empire's softest weapon. Another writes that the women were emissaries of ambition-wearing longing like lacquer. Both are probably right. You turn to Lady Zhen and say softly, "You're playing a dangerous game." Her lips curl. "So is everyone here. I'm just better at it." When she leaves, hours later, the air still carries her perfume, jasmine and something sharper, unidentifiable. You sit in the silence surrounded by cushions that now feel like traps, silk sheets that still smell like her skin. She was right. She will be remembered. But for what? Outside, the lanterns sway in the night breeze. Somewhere, a eunuch places a red mark beside her name on the schedule. Somewhere, another concubine hears the news and clutches her chest. The war of desire is quiet. It doesn't wear armor. It wears nothing at all. You're tired, though no one would dare tell you. You walk the same halls, breathe the same incense, and nod at the same people who bow so low they might as well be part of the floor. But beneath your eyes, the weight shows. In your bones, it lingers. Not the kind of exhaustion that comes from politics or paperwork, though there's plenty of that, but something deeper. The kind that seeps into your skin after too many nights of orchestrated pleasure. Too many ceremonies disguised as intimacy. You are the emperor, yes, but lately it feels like you're also the kingdom's most overworked lover. The scrolls say that pleasure extends life, that sex, if properly managed, can channel cosmic energy and restore balance to the body. But none of the scrolls say what happens when it's constant. When every night you're paired with someone different, each encounter mapped and measured like a state function. They don't say what it does to a man when his body becomes the vessel of a dynasty and his bedroom the beating heart of state ritual. The truth is, you're beginning to feel like a hollow drum struck nightly, echoing endlessly, never quite full. And tonight, you're scheduled again. You didn't pick the name. One of the high eunuchs in coordination with the Empress Dowager and the Bureau of Conjugal Harmony, a real department with real records, chose Lady Rui. It's her first time. She's young, beautiful, hand-selected from a noble household for her gentle demeanor and excellent lineage. All you can think is she'll be terrified, or worse, too prepared. When she arrives, she's swaddled in midnight blue silk, her eyes cast down, but her posture steady. The eunuchs perform their usual duties, confirming the time, logging the entrance, scanning for contraband. When they leave, you sit across from her watching her breathe. She says nothing. Neither do you. The silence stretches. Then almost mechanically, she begins to undress. It's graceful, practiced like she's rehearsed it in front of 1,000 mirrors. You realize she probably has. Her robe slides from her shoulders, revealing skin so pale it looks almost translucent under candlelight. Her hands tremble slightly. Not fear, fatigue. And for a fleeting moment, you wonder how many nights she's been kept awake just waiting for this moment, trained like a soldier, polished like jade, prepared like an offering. You cross the room and gently take her robe from her, placing it aside. You meet her eyes. "You can speak," you say softly. She blinks. "I wasn't told that I should." You smile. Not because it's funny, but because it's honest and rare. What follows is slow, not because you're savoring it, but because you're trying not to rush her or yourself. The truth is, you're tired. But there's something about her, this perfect stranger trained to be your momentary soulmate, that feels fragile. You guide her gently, your touch more comforting than commanding. No cosmic alchemy tonight. No breath-synchronized Taoist maneuvering. Just two people lying side by side beneath silks that itch more than they seduce. And yet halfway through the night, something strange happens. You fall asleep, not immediately, not deliberately, but right there beside her, with her skin still warm under your palm and the candle guttering on the table. Your eyes simply close. And when you wake hours later, she's still there watching you, her body curled inward like a comma. "Did I do something wrong?" she asks. "No," you whisper. "You let me rest." She smiles barely. You're reminded of Emperor Xuanzong, of Tang ruler, so consumed by desire that he reportedly kept a rotating schedule of up to 15 concubines per week. His death predictably came early, found collapsed one morning in the embrace of a woman whose name didn't even make it into the official records. The cause? Sudden fatigue, which, as every historian knows, is code for he overdid it. Whether that's truth or cautionary tale depends on who you ask. One physician from the Ming Dynasty, bold and anonymous, once wrote, "Too much joy drains the liver. The emperor must ration his passion like rice in a famine." The line was scratched out in later copies, but you've seen it in the hidden archives. There's a quiet rebellion in restraint. Of course, not every emperor agreed. Some pushed themselves past every sensible limit. Emperor Jing also, of the Ming, famously built a private pleasure palace within the Forbidden City called the Bao Fang Complete, with secret tunnels, actors, musicians, and women disguised as anything from maids to soldiers. He drowned in a canal after a drunken night of debauchery. He was 29. And then there's you, still here, still breathing, but barely awake, barely real. In the following days, you start saying no, not loudly, not officially, but you delay visits, postpone encounters, request solitude. The eunuchs grumble. The Empress Dowager takes notice. She calls you to her chamber, offers you ginseng, deer antler tonic, even dragon bone dust, a rare and costly aphrodisiac said to restore not only virility, but imperial intent. You decline. She narrows her eyes. You forget what your body means to this empire. "I remember too well," you reply. That night, you do something unthinkable. You request no company. The name tray arrives as always. You send it away untouched. The logs that night will show a blank entry, and tomorrow the palace will ripple with it. Some concubines will cry. Others will scheme. The eunuchs will whisper. But for the first time in what feels like years, you lie down in an empty bed and let sleep come, without effort, without obligation, without watching eyes. And it feels like freedom, brief but real. You hear the drums before you see the procession, low and rhythmic, not ceremonial. just the ordinary heartbeat of palace life echoing through its stone belly. You're seated at the Western Pavilion watching the court ladies sweep fallen wisteria petals into quiet piles. The sky is overcast, that soft silver that makes everything look like a memory. One of your ministers is speaking to you about border grain distribution, but his voice sounds like it's coming from the next room. You nod at the right times. You lift your tea and sip, but your mind is elsewhere. It's where it always drifts these days, toward the question you've been trying to ignore. What happens when pleasure becomes a liability? No one dares say it out loud, but the signs are clear. You've begun to lose control of the rhythm. Concubines no longer wait for selection. They angle. They send gifts, cryptic poems, silk fans stained with perfume and innuendo. Your eunuchs pass you notes with folded corners, hints from women who once waited quietly but now lean forward, hungry-eyed. The scent of desire, once sweet and soft, now stings like vinegar. You wonder when it changed, when your indulgence stopped being a right and started being a weakness. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe it was the night you fainted after a banquet and woke with 3 court physicians arguing over whether your pulse was too fast or just spiritually distressed. Or when the Empress Dowager, her eyes sharp as splinters, placed a hand on your shoulder and said, "You should remember that the Emperor's strength is not infinite." That was weeks ago. Since then, the rotation has only grown longer. More names, more appointments, fewer moments to breathe between. You're not a man anymore. You're a furnace, and the empire is feeding you wood by the cartload. You think of Emperor Xuanzong, who reigned during the height of the Tang Dynasty, a ruler known for his brilliance and patronage of the arts, but also for his obsession with consort Yang Guifei. She was said to be the most beautiful woman in the empire, but her influence ran far deeper than her looks. Ministers courted her favor. Family members were elevated to power. Eventually, rebellion swept the empire, and when the court fled the capital, the soldiers refused to continue unless Yang was executed. Xuanzong, broken and weeping, gave the order. Was it love that doomed him? Or just too much pleasure too often for too long? Pleasure unrestrained becomes rot, and you can feel it in your own palace. Now your ministers, once deferential, have begun pausing longer after their requests, as if testing the edge of your disinterest. The Bureau of Harem Affairs sends its daily reports later and later, as if assuming you'll be too preoccupied to notice. And the Empress Dowager, she reads their reports like tea leaves. A quiet coup wrapped in motherly concern. You remember another cautionary tale? Emperor Ai of the Han Hu grew so besotted with his male favorite, Dong Xian, that he neglected court business entirely. It's said he once cut the sleeve of his robe rather than wake Dong when he'd fallen asleep on it. The gesture became a euphemism, the passion of the cut sleeve suite in poetry, disastrous in policy. Dong was later executed. The emperor died young alone and mocked. You've never cut a sleeve for anyone, but the rot comes all the same. That afternoon, you visit the Imperial Archive. You don't go through the usual gate you slip in through the West Wing. Alone except for a single eunuch who knows how to stay invisible, you find the scroll you're looking for. The private logbooks of Emperor Yongle, a ruthless man, effective, feared. His harem was enormous, but he kept strict rules. No visits on consecutive nights. No woman saw him twice in the same lunar cycle unless summoned by edict. His sexual regimen was so disciplined it resembled military training. One line from his diary stops you cold. An emperor who loses himself in softness will drown beneath silk. You close the scroll. That night, you cancel all visits. The eunuchs blink confused. The concubines fidget. The Empress Dowager is notified and sends a servant to ask if you are ill. You respond simply, "No, I am recalibrating." You eat alone, walk the courtyard alone, sleep in silence. You wake before dawn and meditate, not on dragons or cosmic energy, but on withdrawal. You repeat this for a week. The palace shifts. At first, confusion, then discomfort, then panic. You notice things. The way Lady Jen watches you now, not with desire, but calculation slightly off kilter. The way Suri bows more deeply, her eyes unreadable. The way Laner sends a poem but doesn't sign it. You sense the gears turning, the whispers spreading. The emperor has withdrawn. Some call it illness. Some call it enlightenment. The Empress Dowager calls it a temporary realignment of imperial responsibility. But you call it what it is: a test. What remains of your court when you stop playing its game? Who dares speak up when there's no body to flatter? And how long before the silence exposes the lies? Late at night, you walk the empty corridors, listening to your own footsteps echo. Somewhere in the East Wing, you hear two maids arguing softly about which consort has fallen most from favor. One says Lady Jiao, the other says Lady Qing. Neither knows you're 3 doors away. You smile. You're beginning to see again, to feel the shape of the palace beneath the perfume, the silk, the moaning beneath the rot. Because indulgence makes you blind, and now your eyes are open. Your footsteps echo through the hall of retiring clouds, a place once reserved for ceremonial farewells, but now half abandoned. Its echoing corridors cluttered with dusty scroll racks and wall tapestries faded by decades of incense smoke. You used to come here as a boy, slipping away from your tutors to press your fingers against the dragon-etched panels, imagining what it would feel like to be powerful. Back then, you thought emperors were gods untouchable, eternal. You had no idea that someday you'd sit on the dragon throne and feel more like an actor than a sovereign, and even less idea that now, in the twilight of your reign, you'd be walking through this old hall wondering where all that power actually went. Because something's changed, not just in you, in the air, in the silence of the palace that used to buzz with rehearsed seductions and stifled giggles. The harem is quieter now. Fewer names appear on the night tray. The Empress Dowager has stopped sending veiled suggestions about which lady needs your attention. The eunuchs bow more carefully. The concubines speak less. No one knows what to do with the sovereign who refuses to play his part. The withdrawal was supposed to be temporary, a reset, but it's turned into a reckoning. You're beginning to notice the women who were always invisible, the ones who never sent poems, never wore elaborate hairpieces, never fought for the front row at the spring banquet. Like Lady Nuo, who walks with a limp from an old riding accident and spends most of her days tending a miniature herb garden in the corner of her courtyard. Or Lady Chen, who teaches the younger girls needlework not because she has to, but because it quiets her hands. And even Lady Qing, who once betrayed you in whispers but now seems haunted by her own silence. These women weren't trained to seduce. They weren't built for performance. They've lived in the margins of your desire, and now, in the quiet, they emerge. Not as temptresses, but as people. You visit Lady Nuo one afternoon. She's startled when you appear. You've never been to her chambers before. She offers tea with shaking hands, stammering through the formalities until finally you ask her to stop. "Tell me something real," you say. She blinks. "Like what?" "Something no one else would tell me." She thinks for a long moment. The ginkgo trees by the north wall. Your gardeners have trimmed them too much. The leaves won't last through the first frost. You stare at her. It's the most honest thing anyone has said to you all week. You laugh, and she laughs too. Timid at first, then full. It's not seductive. It's not calculated. It's human. And you realize painfully how long it's been since you were spoken to without motive. Later, you sit with Lady Chen. You don't touch her, don't undress her. She tells you how she once tried to escape the palace, not with a ladder or a disguise, but by pretending to be mad. "I thought if I muttered enough poetry and stared at my food like it was on fire, they'd send me to the Temple of Quiet Waters." "Did it work?" you ask. She shakes her head. "They just moved me to the coldest room." You almost reach for her hand, but instead, you thank her. The concubines are watching now, not with jealousy or longing, but confusion. You're breaking the rules of the game they were born into. Without the structure of seduction, without the rotation and the hierarchy, and the sweet poison of imperial favor, the system starts to collapse. Some panic, others retreat. A few adapt. Lady Laner sends a letter requesting permission to join the Imperial Library as a copyist. You approve it. 2 more women follow her. Lady May asks to teach painting. You assign her to the Artisans' Hall. 1 girl asks to leave entirely, to return to her family. You let her go with a carriage and 10 bolts of brocade. The Empress Dowager says nothing, but her silence has begun to tighten like a noose. You've become unpredictable. Unpredictability is dangerous. You're reminded of the last emperor of the southern Song Xiaobing. A child, really, but an emperor all the same, fleeing from the Mongols, carried on the backs of loyal generals, shuffled from island to island. When all hope was lost, his final attendant picked him up and leapt into the sea, a desperate act dressed in loyalty. Or perhaps just an escape from the weight of being a symbol too young to understand it. You're not a child, but sometimes you feel no freer than Xiaobing. The irony is sharp. You were taught to command armies, write poetry, administer land, read the stars, but no one taught you how to say enough. Not to the court, not to the harem, not to the hungry god of performance that lives in every corridor of the palace. And now that you have, they don't know who you are anymore. Neither do you. You walk the palace at night alone, robe dragging, hair unbound, a ghost of your own legend. You pass by the eastern chamber where Lady Jen once pressed her lips to your ear and told you she could make you forget every other name. You remember how many nights you believed her, but now you remember them all. Every woman, every performance, every lie told in soft candlelight. And you carry them with you, not as shame, but as truth. Because desire is not evil, but unexamined desire. That is a prison. And you finally found the key. Morning comes quiet. The sun filtered through the silk screens of your chamber in pale gold. No drums, no summons, no clatter of trays or murmuring eunuchs at the threshold. Just a breeze carrying the scent of sweet osmanthus from the south gardens, and the realization that for the first time in what feels like years, your first waking thought isn't about duty or performance or which concubine is waiting in the hall. It's about the sky, about the sound of your own breath, about stillness. You rise without assistance. The eunuchs accustomed to a slower rhythm now enter only after you call. They dress you in a simpler robe, undyed silk with no embroidery, no gold-threaded dragons wrestling among clouds, just fabric, just breath on skin. When the Empress Dowager hears that you've requested no court meetings today, she sends you a note in her own handwriting. Are you preparing to abdicate or simply learning how to disappear? You don't respond. You spend the morning in the pavilion where artisans once embroidered your ceremonial cloak. The women have all been dismissed for the festival, so it's empty now, dust motes drifting lazily through the shafts of light. You sit cross-legged on the dais and stare at the walls where your own image once loomed, painted, gilded, flattered by brushstrokes into godhood. And you begin to write not a decree, not a confession, just a letter to no one. Or maybe to all of them, to the ones who waited in silence, to the ones who faked ecstasy with trembling fingers, to the ones who whispered lies because it was the only way to be heard, to the ones who touched me and wondered if I was even there. You start again. You were never invisible. I was hidden behind robes and rituals and roles. I was a man trapped in the costume of a god, and I asked you to believe in me when I no longer believed in myself. The ink dries slowly. You fold the letter and tuck it beneath the floorboard of the dais, knowing it will likely never be found. But it's not for them. It's for you. Later, you walk the harem one final time. Not as emperor, not as lover, just as a man saying goodbye. Lady Xia is painting a branch of plum blossoms with such care that you hesitate to interrupt her. She looks up and smiles, and you simply nod. Lady Chen is sewing again, her fingers precise. She doesn't look up, but you catch the twitch at the corner of her mouth. Lady Nuo's garden has begun to bloom. Tiny green shoots curling from terracotta pots. She gestures toward one. This one's for you, she says. It's bitter root, strong, ugly, but useful. You thank her. You reach Suri's quarters last. She's packing a lacquer box, not to leave, just to organize. You sit beside her on the tatami mat and help fold her silks. Neither of you speaks for a long time. Then she says, "When I first came here, they told me the emperor was made of gold and fire." You exhale softly. They lied. She nods. Yes, but I think they meant you were impossible to touch. You turn to her. Am I still? She doesn't answer, but she leans into your shoulder just for a moment and then returns to folding. At sunset, you climb the eastern tower, where the view stretches beyond the palace walls to the river, to the flickering rooftops of the city, to the hills rising in the distance like sleeping beasts. The same hills your ancestors looked at, the same ones your sons might, if you choose to let them. The wind is stronger up here, honest. You breathe it in. You don't know what kind of emperor history will call you. Perhaps indulgent, perhaps disillusioned, maybe just tired. But you do know this. You're no longer ruled by desire. You've survived its sweetness and its poison. You've survived the 1,000 hands that reached for you with longing, calculation, fear, and hope. And now, you reach back only when you choose. No scroll can record that. No historian can measure it. But somewhere deep in the bones of the palace, where stories grow between stones and silk, your name will hum differently now. Not as a legend, not as a god, but as a man who remembered how to be still. The moon rises slow and full, casting long silver ribbons across the roofs of the inner court. You're not in your bedchamber tonight. You're seated beneath the old ginkgo tree near the lotus pond, wrapped in a simple cloak, hair unpinned, watching the lantern sway on the breeze. Somewhere across the city, a bell chimes for the last watch. In the stillness, you hear it all. The crickets in the reeds, the soft swish of silk as a nightmaid crosses the stone path, the distant hush of water trickling from a jade spout. There are no concubines tonight, no tray of names, no footsteps pacing in hopeful rhythm outside your doors. The women are still here, of course, but they no longer orbit you like moons caught in gravity. They have their own tides now. You've given them that, not out of mercy, but because you needed it too. You once thought power was having everything at your fingertips: bodies, silks, whispered adoration. But now, in the hush of this night, you realize it's the opposite. Power is choosing what to hold and what to finally let rest. You exhale and feel the breath go all the way down. Let the ministers squabble over lineage. Let the scholars debate your legacy. Let the poets romanticize you or not. You've seen the inside of desire. You've watched it shimmer, bruise, and peel away. And now, at last, you can sleep. You close your eyes not as emperor, not as dragon son of heaven, but simply as yourself, alone but not lonely still and entirely awake.